What's good, everyone? Venomous back with a Venomous Classic. This time we're on Daybreak. Let's get into it. Flash is facing off against Life, two of the best players of all time. This is game 6 of their best of 5. There's Flash, the infallible macro Terran. This is a throwback game, the 2013 MLG Dallas Finals. I was at this event live in person, and this is one of the best StarCraft 2 events I've ever been to. Now, the finals were particularly interesting because, at the time, Terran vs. Zerg was in a tough spot metagame-wise. Zerg was generally considered to be the weaker option, in a way. I mean, Zerg wasn't terrible, but similar to the beginning of Wings of Liberty, Zerg was at a disadvantage, because this, of course, was at the very beginning of HOTS. Now, I will say that at the beginning of Wings of Liberty, the disadvantages for Zerg were much more significant. Whether it be Delta Quadrant, Lost Temple Steps of War map pool, the unsalvageable bunker, or the 100% refund for salvage bunker, the no neutral depot at the base of the ramp. I mean, there were a lot of things keeping Zerg down in the early game, the early era of StarCraft 2. But we saw paragons of Zerg play, like Fruit Dealer, who actually fell off and didn't have an extended career like many thought he would. But Nesty is another example of one of those players who, even though he rose up and was very good at a time when Zerg was considered to be weak, he was a player who transformed the game and did things that sort of impacted the way that we would play and perceive the game for the rest of the time that it would be played. Nesty was very good about sort of feeling his opponent out and knowing when he could make drones. The thing about Nesty's brilliance is he was kind of the first guy to do a lot of different things right that we generally consider to be right. Like he kind of set the mold in many ways, and we can see that Life here is in the main, scouting around. He's going to see the CC first option, and of course he's gone for hatchery first himself, and will be mining up to 100 gas to get link speed. But the way that Life was special at the beginning of his time period, which of course Nesty and Fruit Dealer right at the beginning of Wings of Liberty in 2010, the very, very beginning of StarCraft 2, and Life was, I would say, at his best at the beginning of Heart of the Swarm, which was the first expansion a couple years after Wings of Liberty. And I think that one of the things that Life did really well was his ability to counterattack. And he really held people back with his ability to counterattack and keep people on the back foot. One of the things that we see constantly, whether it be in games from 2010 on Steps of War, or all the way to now in Legacy of the Void in 2017, Terran players love to have their door down while they're doing mid-game pushes on the Zerg, and they want to reinforce their army. Now, this is a very obvious concept to many people, yeah. Like, oh, of course you want to be reinforcing your army by having all of your unit-producing facilities rallied out to your opponent. So this might seem very rudimentary, but for the longest time, Zerg players just never took advantage of it. And even to this day, I would say that no one takes advantage of it quite like StarTilt Life. And when I say it, the intangible it is the fact that the Terran has their front door down and is vulnerable to counterattacks while they are attacking. Now, like I said, it might seem obvious. Oh, well, you just counterattack, that's it? No, it was more than that. Life was always in his opponent's face. He was always threatening a significant counterattack. And the way that Life positioned his units was special, as we see a third CC coming down here for Flash, and it will be scouted by Life. Life, of course, has a third of his own, and he's just making drones and queens. Looks like a macro game here on Daybreak, which of course is nice to see. But Life would always position his units in such a way where he would have to have the right amount of Zerglings set up for counterattacks in the right position, and very oftentimes, if he were to overcommit and send too many Lings out to counterattack, then he would just die to whatever push that he would be defending whenever he sent his counterattack in. Another thing that Life did really well with regards to micro is he always set up flanks, it seems like, better than any other Zerg. Now, flanking is very important, and it seems as though in Legacy of the Void, as Zerg has kind of been exposed to less map disadvantages, people have kind of forgotten how important flanking is. And when Zergs were playing on Shakuras Plateau, and Steppes of War, and Delta Quadrant, and maps like this, if they just attack moved from one direction, they would lose, because the maps were too severely choke pointed. A couple of Hellions are poking out here at the third for Flash. And Flash is just kind of gaining some map control and ranging around, doing the standard TVZ Hellion harassment that we see in Heart of the Swarm, and we still see in Legacy of the Void. This is classic stuff. Life is starting to take his gas here in Tekken Delaire. Notice he's still powering drones out. So how should we look at Life? How should we view his legacy? I think despite the scandal that he had that many people view as kind of like completely career and reputation destroying, I think that he had so much success and was so innovative and really completely encapsulated how you're supposed to play Zerg that even though he made that severe mistake, we can still appreciate his old games, we can still go back and watch his brilliance, and more importantly, we can study him within the context of the history of the game and how he affected the metagame. Because no matter what Life did in terms of, you know, losing a Pro League match to Terminator, you can't undo history. This is something I see in sports all the time. Like a good example, like USC, college football. Oh, it turns out Reggie Bush was taking money, you know, to kick ass in football, essentially. People wanted to build up a friendship with Reggie Bush, so they gave him money. And the NCAA found out about that and said, okay, y'all are going to have to vacate your championships. Essentially saying, well, even though that year you went undefeated and beat everyone, as we see Sibling Harass is going to be deflected here by the Hellions, the NCAA said, okay, well, that never happened. We're just erasing it from history. So then you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, so everyone was there, everyone saw them happen, they played a legitimate game. The fact that Bush took money on the side didn't have anything to do with it. So we can still view this as a legitimate competition. But a lot of people don't think that way and almost treat it like, oh, even though they won and they didn't incur an unfair advantage, it's like erased. And I just think that's kind of absurd. Like, I don't like USC at all, but the fact that the NCAA said, okay, USC, you like never won those titles, it's kind of silly, because they so obviously did, you know, like the players went on to have great careers, many of them. We see muta harassment occurring in the main here, but Flash is going to retreat some of his army, and not a lot of damage is going to occur. 2-2 already fired up here for Flash. So the point of what I'm getting at here with this football analogy is saying, even if someone screws up and somehow taints the reputation later on, it doesn't mean that everything they did is devalued. Now, that would be different if Life was like a map hacker and somehow was map hacking during tournaments, but he wasn't. I mean, he threw games, he lost on purpose. That's completely different than cheating and then incurring an advantage against your opponent, because in that case your wins would be delegitimized. So I think this absurd vitriol we see for Life on the forums is really overblown and kind of ludicrous. And you usually see that from people who didn't even watch his games and are just kind of talking out of their ass. Life is going to fly in here into Flash's main, and Flash's army is so far out that he's just going to have to try to counterattack. Now, Life did take that fourth down at the very bottom right-hand corner, not in the middle. So it looks like after Flash discovered that, he might actually range back a little bit. Okay, no, maybe not. He's going to focus onto this queen. He has a nice mix of Hellion Mine. This is the kind of composition that you want to aim for against Zerg, is a nice mix. Marauder, Mine, Hellbat, or Hellion, excuse me. He has a little bit of everything. This makes it harder to engage than just like a straight up Marine army. Muta's flying in here, and Baneling's getting some decent connections. Notice that Flash was pushed all the way up onto Creep, just standing there. And Life has been building his Muta count all game as he's been harassing. Great move by Life here as we see that attack pretty much got completely cleaned up. But some dropping is going to occur at the back of the natural. And back in Heart of the Swarm, it was very, very popular to drop because the speed boost on the medevac had just been introduced. And of course, dropping is one of those timeless things. And ooh, nice mines here, as Flash had 3 mines burrowed kind of by a pillar so they would be harder to see. Great stuff there. Notice that Life is defending this multi-pronged drop harass while he's being pushed. He's really making it look easy, because all Life has to do is take one bad Widow Mine connection and he can lose an insane amount and be in a position where he's trying to claw his way back in the game. Flash is making this attempt here at the bottom, but beautiful splits here, and Life actually negates a lot of those mines. Flash was really relying on those mines. He's going to burrow some more, and Flash is having to run down here, but Flash, ooh, he's going to stem some more Marines. Beautiful macro here. Flash, of course, known for his macro. Just notice the stream of units for Flash. But the thing is Life has such an insane muta count where you can't just slap Zerg around endlessly when they have this many mutas. Zerg can kind of bull true through in a way and get the money units. Now if you take mine shots like that, things can get tricky and you can lose mutas very quickly. But in general, after you have about 16 plus mutas, you can actually scrap with the Terran in addition to a ground army. Now you never want to fight like muta into Marines straight up, but when you have, you know, 1 to 8 mutas, you're in a position where you're really relying on the ground army to get it done. And in Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm, there was a much heavier focus on players building up their muta count past, you know, a dozen into that double-digit count. I feel like in Legacy of the Void, there's definitely more of a focus on, okay, massling with lots of queens, and then maybe tech into Ravager or tech into Infestor. There were no Ravagers in Heart of the Swarm, so you really had to commit to the muta in the mid game, and a lot of times Zerg had trouble teching into Hive. Drop is going to occur, another beautiful pro of going that many mutaless, is you can just shut drops down. If you have 5 mutas, that drop gets a few Marines off and it's annoying, but we're going to have another engagement here as Flash is doing the textbook Terran move, attack in one location and then move your big army across at the opposite end. Notice he's trying to drop in multiple locations, not just in the main. And he's trying to take a base in the middle. So we see that Flash has been doing good moves throughout the entirety of the game, but Life is just so crisp with his defense and his macro that Flash has not really been able to get an edge. And we see here Widow Mine shots going off, and Flash is going to have to run back, but so many Lings are out, and the muta count here is really devastating. And it's just Marines, but there are so many mutas. Life is flapping an insane amount of wings. The Greater Spire is done. He's morphing Broodlords. Now Flash is the multitasking legend here, so he does pick off a base at the bottom, but Life has the one in the middle. It won't be that big of a deal. He can transfer drones, and he has enough Ling Bane here to pressure forward. I don't think he can end the game, because breaking a bunker with mutas is brutal. Infestor dies there. Infestors, of course, could not cast abilities while burrowed, and we see Life taking some pot shots from the mines, which of course are much stronger in HOTS than they are in Legacy. 3-3 is about to finish here for Flash, but Flash has been fighting the entire game. And even though he's been pressuring very well and keeping Life having to defend in multiple spots, Life is so good at the game where he was able to tech into this incredibly powerful Zerg army regardless of that. Now notice that Life did have to make a lot of mutas to keep up. It's not like he teched straight into Hive super quickly and into fast Broodlord. It was definitely a prolonged style where he stayed with the muta and stayed with layer tech for a while. And I think this is the funnest style of Zerg versus Terran to watch and to play against. And I'm going to go ahead and make the statement that that's for both races. Bio coming up here for Flash. Now Flash is in this weird spot where he's not only out-armied in terms of numbers, but in terms of tech as well. The tech here for Life is so brutal. The Broodlords are incredibly hard to deal with unless you have multiple starports. And notice the multiple starports are just about to finish. And the Broodlords are trying to kite back here. Where the Infestor's Life Come on, Life, you made your bread and butter in Wings of Liberty. Where are the Infestors at? Okay, we're going to see some Mutas and some Banes. Now, the Banes are going to get decent connections. Unfortunately for Life, he does not have any Infestors out here at the moment. He's kind of just throwing everything. The Kitchen Sink, the Broodlords, the Lings, the Corruptors, the Mutas, the Lings, the everything. And it looks like he'll trade a ton of Mutas off, but actually hold. And Flash committed quite a bit to that. He's down to 130 supply. Notice that the Zerg player, the Phenom, Life, is still mining with 15 workers in his main. Or not his main, excuse me, his natural. That's because in this iteration of the game, there were more minerals per base, and you did not mine out as quickly. This is really good for Protoss, especially 2 base all-ins. This Protoss could like sit there and fail an all-in, and then sometimes just do a big follow-up push. Anyway, we see Lings running in here for Life, and Flash is in a weird spot where he doesn't have enough Vikings. And he's kiting back here with Marines. The Broodlords are springing forward. Now the issue here is that the Widow Mines are really what Flash has been relying on for a large portion of the game, but they're really, really awful against Broodlords. Lings are going to come forward here and try to focus the PF, and the PF falls. That's 3 bases for our Terran friend, and if Life wins this, that's the series. And he won the MLG in 2012, the year before this, so if he wins this, he'll be the back-to-back MLG Dallas champ. Once with Wings of Liberty, once with Heart of the Swarm, and he would have beaten last the incredible Macro Terran and Polt, who I don't even need to talk about because he's so popular and talented. And now it looks as though he's going to beat Flash as more Lings scream forward here, and Life wins it all. Flash types out, and that's the Venomous Classic. Make sure if you liked this video, you leave a like rating, leave me a comment, maybe even favorite. I have my social media and my Patreon links down there in the description of the video if you want to support me there. And make sure you subscribe and click the bell notification icon. Have a good one.